So we've been focusing on trinomials and we've been factoring them and we've been solving them, and now I want to switch gears just a tiny bit. We're going to stop referring to these as trinomials because we're going to start turning these into functions. From now on, you're going to see problems like this. Y equals x squared plus 3x plus 2. This is what we call a quadratic function. All of the work that we have done with trinomials has been leading up to this. Okay, instead of it being equal to 0, it's now equal to y. Okay, now you already know how to solve a quadratic function. One of the ways is by factoring it. Okay, when you are solving a quadratic function, you are finding the x-intercepts. We're going to get more into that, okay, so that's going to be in class. Right now, I want to focus on the idea of another way to solve. Those of you who hate factoring, you are going to be so happy with what I'm about to show you. There is something called the quadratic formula, which will allow you to solve any and all quadratic functions, or in this case, what you're thinking of them as, is trinomials. So the quadratic function is what you see at the top. X equals the opposite of b, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. Okay? Hopefully right now something is triggering in your head and you're thinking, I know those letters, A, B, and C. We have been using them consistently as we've been factoring. So hopefully you can picture what we're going to be doing when we find A, B, and C. So I want you to think back to functions that you've done previously, okay? When you are solving for x, when you're finding the x-intercepts, you are setting y equal to 0, okay? Because you want to go up or down none on the graph. Again, we're going to talk about this more in class. So when you are using the quadratic formula, you've got steps over here on the left side. You've got the first step, which is to set y equal to 0. Then we're going to plug a, b, and c into the quadratic function and solve. We're going to separate into two expressions, and then we're going to add and subtract. Okay, so the best way to do this is for you to see it. Okay, so first thing that we're going to do is set y equal to 0. That's our first step. So here we have y. So I'm going to change this to be 0 equals 7x squared plus 3x. Okay, now notice that our next step says to plug a, b, and c into the quadratic formula. So I need to identify my a, b, and c in my problem that I am solving. Okay, I've got y equals 7x squared plus 3x. So we should be able to recognize that a is 7, b is 3, but what is c? Okay, there is no c. C should be right here. If there is no c, what do we know that c is? C is 0. Okay, so we're going to plug a, b, and c into the quadratic formula. Now, I've made kind of a set of blanks here to try to help you see where we're going to be plugging in. So the first thing that we're going to plug in here is the opposite of b. Okay, opposite of b is basically you're putting in the opposite sign of what you have for b. If we know that b is positive 3, we put in a negative 3. Then we plug in the b squared, so that's 3 squared minus 4 times a, which is 7, and c, which is 0, all over 2a, which is 7. Now, in your calculator, the first thing that you're going to calculate is under the square root. Okay, so in my calculator, I am not going to use the square root just yet. I'm just going to put in 3 squared minus 4 parentheses 7 close parentheses, open parentheses 0, close parentheses, enter, and I get 9. So now, as I am calculating this down, I have x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 divided by 14. Now, we all know what the square root of 9 is, so I'm just going to erase that, and I'm going to put 3. you might at this point be asking, what in the world is she talking about with plus or minus? Okay, remember step 3, separate this into two expressions. We are going to be calculating plus and minus. Remember how these generally have two solutions? Okay, so we're going to break this up and separate it into two expressions. I'm going to move over here because I know the series symbol will get in our way. So we're going to have x equals -3 plus 3 divided by 14. And we're going to have x equals -3 minus 3 divided by 14. Now, in my handy-dandy calculator, I'm going to do -3 plus 3, enter, divided by 14 gives me 0. X equals 0. Okay, my other one, I'm going to do -3 minus 3, enter, divided by 14 equals, I get a decimal, but I don't want a decimal right now. I want a fraction. That gives me -3/7. Those are your two solutions. Okay, so let's work another one. I'm going to pause for a second and maybe let you finish copying that down. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, make sure you've got this down on your paper, guys. This is very important information. We're going to be using the quadratic formula for the next few weeks. Okay, let's try another one. Y equals 3x squared plus 2x plus, let's say, 1. Okay, so step 1, set it equal to 0. So 0 equals, remember I'm setting y equal to 0, 3x squared plus 2x plus 1. Alright, so if I were to try to factor this, it's actually unfactorable because there are no two numbers that multiply to give you +3 and add to give you +2. Okay, so that's always a good clue to use the quadratic formula. Now I'm going to plug into the quadratic formula. That's x equals opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. There is a song to help you remember this formula, so I will sing it in class if somebody asks me to. So let's plug in a, b, and c. A is 3, b is 2, c is 1. So I get, next step, x equals opposite of b. Okay, b is +2. We're going to do -2 plus or minus square root b, which is 2, squared, minus 4, a, which is 3, c, which is 1, all over 2 times a, which is 3. The hardest part comes with making sure you do it in the calculator correctly. So again, I'm going to do what's under the square root first. So 2 squared minus 4, parentheses 3, parentheses 1, and I get -8. So now I have x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of -8 all over 6. Now, when you try to calculate this, you're going to discover something. Your calculator is going to give you an error. Why is your calculator going to give you an error? You cannot calculate a negative square root. Okay, there are no two exact numbers that will multiply to give you -8. Okay, you'd have to do +4 and -2, but you cannot take the square root of a negative number. This is an example of an equation that has no real number solutions. This would be an equation that does not cross the x-axis. Okay, our previous equation, I'm going to go back to it, would cross our x-axis. Our function would cross our x-axis at 0 and at x equals -3/7. Okay, so try your hand at a few of these.